In January 2026, at a show built for phones, robots, and the kind of technology that fits in your pocket, Mercury pulled a cover off something that had no business being there. A V12 engine, taller than the people standing next to it, louder in concept alone than anything else in the room. And the moment it was revealed, every major boat builder on the planet started paying attention. This is the Mercury 808, and if it reaches full production, it won't just rewrite what an outboard engine can do. It will make diesel power plants obsolete on some of the biggest, most expensive boats on the water. The technology inside sounds like it shouldn't be possible. The numbers it produces don't seem real, and the competition has no answer ready. But to understand why the 808 changes everything, you first have to meet the engine it was born from. CES is not a boat show. It never has been. Every January in Las Vegas, the convention floor fills up with smartphones, electric vehicles, AI robots, and software that does things you didn't know you needed. Boat engines don't belong there. Nobody expects them. Nobody plans for them. That's exactly why Mercury showing up worked so well. Because the thing is, modern boats aren't really boats anymore. They're floating computers that happen to sit on water. Touchscreens talk to joysticks. Software communicates with the engine hundreds of times every single second. The helm of a high-end boat in 2026 looks closer to a fighter jet cockpit than anything your grandfather captained. So when Brunswick CEO David Fuchs walked onto that floor and pulled the cover off a V12 that towered over everything around it, it didn't feel out of place at all. It felt inevitable. To understand the 808, you have to go back to February 2021, because that's when Mercury did something the entire marine industry said couldn't be done. They built the world's first V12 outboard engine and named it the Verado 600. Before it existed, the ceiling for outboard power was roughly 450 horsepower. One company, Seven Marine, briefly cracked that with a 627 horsepower monster. But Volvo Penta bought them out and shut the whole operation down before it ever became a real threat. So when Mercury arrived with 12 cylinders, 7.6 liters, and 600 horsepower bolted to the back of a boat, there was nothing else like it on the planet. And here's the part that still holds true today. It remains the most powerful production outboard money can buy. But the raw power isn't even the most interesting part of what Mercury built. Most outboards steer by swinging the entire engine left and right on the transom. Mercury threw that idea out completely. On the V12, the engine itself stays perfectly still. Only the gear case, the lower unit sitting down in the water, actually turns. That had never been done on an outboard before, ever. And it changes how a large boat handles in ways that are hard to overstate. You're no longer wrestling a 1,200-pound engine around every time you turn the wheel. The steering feels immediate and sharp. The swing goes a full 45 degrees compared to the standard 30, and engines can sit just 27 inches apart. Docking a 50-foot boat suddenly feels like parallel parking a sedan. Then there's the transmission nobody saw coming. Every other outboard ever built runs one gear. Mercury gave the V12 a real 2-speed automatic gearbox, the first one ever fitted to an outboard. First gear digs in hard to pull heavy hulls up out of the water. Second gear settles into smooth, fuel-efficient cruising. Mercury says you genuinely cannot feel the shift happen. Add contra-rotating propellers, 4 blades forward and 3 aft spinning in opposite directions, and the V12 grabs water in a way no single propeller ever could. That is the foundation. Now comes what Mercury built on top of it. Numbers only mean something when you understand what they represent. So let's walk through what the V12 Verado 600 actually does, because this is where the foundation stops being impressive and starts being absurd. The engine displaces 7.6 liters across all 12 cylinders. It weighs 1,260 pounds, nearly double Mercury's smaller 450R at 689. It revs between 5,600 and 6,400 RPM and runs on regular 87 octane pump gas, not race fuel, not some specialty blend you have to hunt down at a marina that stocks it twice a year. The same gas you put in your truck. It also carries a 150 amp alternator, That sounds like a footnote until you realize most competing outboards top out around 70 to 80 amps. The reason Mercury doubled that number is because boats in this price range don't just have navigation screens anymore. They run full air conditioning systems, commercial-grade refrigeration, entertainment setups, and enough displays to run a small television studio. The alternator has to keep up with all of it. Now for the number that genuinely stops people mid-sentence. A 46-foot boat running just two V12s hit 75 miles per hour and went from 0 to 20 in 4.8 seconds. That is a vessel the size of a school bus, accelerating like a sports car. And those same two engines drank 20% less fuel than three 425 horsepower motors producing less speed. More power, less fuel, fewer engines. And one captain can run up to 6 of them simultaneously from a single joystick, walking a massive boat sideways into a slip with one hand like it weighs nothing. That is the V12 at its base. What Mercury revealed in Las Vegas pushes every single one of those numbers further. Mercury has a habit. Once you spot it, the 808 stops looking like a concept and starts looking like a blueprint. Their racing division has spent years taking normal production engines and strapping superchargers on top. A supercharger forces more air into the combustion chamber than the engine could ever pull in on its own. More air means more fuel can burn. More fuel burning means more power. Same engine block, same basic architecture, completely different output. They already proved this with their V8. The standard 4.6-liter V8 makes around 300 horsepower breathing naturally. Mercury's racing team supercharged that exact same engine into the 450R, then pushed the boost pressure up another 26% and turned it into the 500R. Same block, same displacement. 200 extra horsepower pulled out of thin air, literally. And the supercharged 500R still weighs as little as 720 pounds, barely heavier than the engine it started as. Now apply that exact formula to a 7.6-liter V12, making 600 horsepower. The math writes itself. A 35% power increase from forced induction lands you right at 808. Mercury didn't pick that number randomly. The name is the engineering summary. They showed you exactly what they did without saying a single word about how they did it. The internals get reinforced to handle the added stress. The supercharger itself adds some bulk. But Mercury's track record with the V8 program shows they already know how to keep the package compact while the power climbs. Put two 808s on the same transom and you have over 1,600 combined horsepower hanging off the back of a boat. Horsepower that sits outside the hull entirely. No space sacrificed below decks. No deep draft forcing you away from shallow water. No complicated inboard systems buried where nobody can easily reach them. That combination is precisely what made the diesel world stop and recalculate. Because for the first time, outboard power is threatening territory diesel has owned without competition for decades. For decades, the rule was simple. Once your boat crossed 40 feet, you ran diesel. There was no debate, no alternative worth considering, no outboard manufacturer even attempting to change the conversation. Diesel inboard engines were the only powertrain that could move that much boat reliably across that much water. And diesel came with a cost that went far beyond the price tag. Those engines are heavy. They sit deep inside the hull, which means they eat into every inch of usable space below decks. Cabins get smaller, storage disappears. The mechanical systems surrounding them are complicated enough that routine service requires a specialist, and a breakdown offshore means you are at the mercy of whoever can reach you. Owners in that segment accepted all of it because they had no other choice. The V12 Verado 600 started quietly, cracking that wall. Builders began bolting them onto 50 and 60-foot hulls, and the results were hard to argue with. Better performance, shallower draft, and everything below decks stayed exactly where the designer intended it to be. The 808 doesn't crack that wall. It removes it entirely. 2 of them on a large sport fishing boat or a luxury yacht deliver over 1,600 horsepower from outside the hull. The space diesel would have consumed stays open. The draft stays shallow. And the performance numbers we just walked through don't drop. They climb. The price will shock some people. A single V12 600 already sells in the low to mid $80,000 range. An 808 will almost certainly cross $100,000 per unit. but buyers in this segment are already spending that on diesel twin installations. The total cost of ownership starts looking very similar, and the outboard package wins on almost every other measure. That is why Mercury aimed this engine directly at the yacht and large sport fishing market. That is also why every other outboard brand is watching very carefully. Mercury isn't running this race alone. The rest of the industry sees exactly what's happening, and they're moving. Just not fast enough. Suzuki has been rumored for a while to be developing their first ever V8 outboard, a push that would finally break through their existing 400 horsepower ceiling. No confirmed specs, no release date, just credible whispers from people close to the program. Honda made a real move in 2024 with the BF350 V8, and then did something unexpected. They partnered with McLaren, the Formula One constructor, to sharpen their engine development further. That partnership carries genuine credibility. But a 350 horsepower V8 developed alongside a racing team is still not an answer to a supercharged V12. Yamaha continues running their 425 horsepower XTO as the flagship. It's proven, reliable, and respected. It is also not a supercharged V12. Brunswick made their intentions impossible to ignore on an earnings call this past April. 5 separate new engine development projects confirmed running simultaneously. Mercury's parent company is not slowing down. The competition is moving. Nobody is standing still. But right now, not one of them has a supercharged V12 concept sitting on a show floor. Mercury does. The 808 is still a concept. That needs to be said clearly. There is no official price, no confirmed release date, and no production announcement from Mercury. None of that exists yet, but Mercury showed it twice. CES in January, the Miami Boat Show in February, parked in booth 1700, towering over everything within sight. That second appearance matters more than people realize. Companies do not drag an unserious concept to 2 major international shows in the span of 6 weeks. The logistics alone tell you something about how committed Mercury actually is. And there is a pattern worth recognizing here. The V12 Verado 600 followed the exact same slow burn before it became the most powerful production outboard on the planet. Every sign points to the 808 following the same road. But until Mercury bolts one to a real boat and names a price, it remains exactly what they called it. A concept. Mercury didn't just reveal an engine in Las Vegas. They announced what the next generation of large boat power is going to look like, and the rest of the industry is still processing it. The diesel era on big water hulls may have a countdown clock on it now. Not today, not next year. But the direction is no longer a question. One cover pulled off at a tech show full of phones and robots, and suddenly an entire segment of the marine industry is recalculating everything it thought it knew. The 808 is a concept today. So is the V12, right up until it wasn't.